Hey guys. So this journal I know is really serious, but it's a very important topic to me. I usually teach it, or in the past, I've taught it when I teach English 11, and we do Native American literature throughout teaching American literature in chronological historical order. So I didn't get to do that this year because I have you guys for English 9 and 10. And so we just did some Native American mythology. But I wanted to do this as a journal before the end of the semester. So it was perfect timing when this day in history was about the Indian Removal Act and Andrew Jackson. So, really bad part of American history, in most people's opinion. I'd say 98%, 99.9%. You would have to be pretty cold to think it was a good idea to do what the federal government did to all of these people. So, if you look at the Cherokee Nation, this is just a little map. Excuse me, pardon me. Um, this was the Cherokee Nation prior to the European and American, which Europeans. Uh, Before that invasion from Europe and England, you had pretty much this whole green area being part of the Cherokee Nation. If you notice what you visit now and know as, and maybe you haven't visited before, most people that have lived here at least know about it because of the casinos, or the Hills Have Eyes, I think is the name of it. The outdoor drama that they do, that some school systems will take students to when they're younger. So the present Cherokee Reservation is just this little bitty thing right here. And then after the removal, and some Cherokee stayed, some tried to relocate and come back. Is in Oklahoma. So, and there's more in the middle of Oklahoma too that I mentioned in the journal. But this is where most of the Cherokee ended up after the Indian Removal Act. But it did affect other tribes besides the Cherokee. But the primary source document I'm going to read for you today, which will give you a very eye-opening firsthand account of what it was like to watch this happen as it happened. They took the northern route. So, and I actually, the account I first read, and not this map, but another map I usually use, I got from a book while I was in Cherokee, full of Cherokee mythology, but it ends with um, this firsthand account I'm going to read to you, and a map. So the map that I got from Cherokee shows them being removed from Murphy, North Carolina. That's where this soldier um, says he got on the caravan, the soldier caravan for the removal. So anyway, they took this northern route. Thousands upon thousands of people died during this. It's a very sad part of history, but one that you need to know about, and you need to read about it from somebody who witnessed it, versus just reading about somebody writing about it, like here. So I'm also teaching you about primary source documents to do this. Secondary sources would be this, whatever people write about the event. Primary source is this, which is this dude who actually lived it, John G. Burnett. Back in the 1800s, people, and even before that, people used to tell birthday stories, especially like as they got older, and wanted some stories of their lives to be passed down from generation to generation. So this is his birthday story, and he wanted his children and people to know about the Cherokee removal through the eyes of a private soldier. So this annotation again is a secondary source, okay, about it that I'm going to read to you. Then I'm going to read through the primary source, and this is his story of the Cherokee removal through his eyes. Okay, so the annotation says by, let me see if Focus Mouse will work. No, Focus Mouse hates PDFs. I've got to write Screencastify about the fact that Focus Mouse That's gonna be my DJ name is Focus Mouse. Focus Mouse does not like us. So we're gonna just do away with Focus Mouse and even go ahead and hide our tools. Okay. It's gonna be crazy. All right, here we go. The annotation by President Andrew Jackson's election in 1828, the only large concentrations. I don't like that angle. There we go. Yeah. All right. I need to look somewhat okay while I'm reading, right? Okay. Okay. I don't know. Why does my face look so all right. I had it like I wanted it, and now I'm sad. All right, here we go. I just need to go further away. All right. The only large concentrations of Indian tribes remaining on the East Coast were located in the South. The Cherokee adopted the subtle way of life of the surrounding and encroaching white society. They were consequently known, along with the Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw, as one of the 5 civilized tribes. Civilization, however, was not enough, and the Jackson administration forced most of these tribes west during the first half of the 1830s, clearing Southern territory for the use of whites. There was also talk of gold, another economic greedy reason they wanted to start this. Chief John Ross, who, by the way, should be taught as an American hero, Native American Chief John Ross, was the principal chief of the Cherokee in Georgia. In this 1836 letter addressed to the Senate and House of Representatives, Ross protested as fraudulent the Treaty of New Etocha. 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 I'm probably not saying that right. That forced the Cherokee out of Georgia. In 1838, federal troops forcibly displaced the last of the Cherokee from their homes. Their trip to Indian Territory in Oklahoma is known as the Trail of Tears. In May 1838, federal militias started to round up Cherokees and move them into stockades, basically a fancy word for concentration camp. Everyone should be familiar with concentration camp. You've heard about them when you've studied Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. You also heard about them probably. America had concentration camps once again in California, specifically during the war after the bombing of Pearl Harbor for Asian Americans. The stockades are basically concentration camps in several southern states. They were then forced to march 1,000 miles westward. 4,000 to 6,000 Cherokees died as a result of this removal. The journey became known as the Trail of Tears, or the Trail Where They Cried. 50 years later, in 1890, Private John G. Burnett, who served in the Mounted Infantry, told his children his memories of the Trail of Tears, which he described. This always gets me, by the way. You're going to hear me have trouble talking and tearing up, as the execution of the most brutal order in the history of American warfare. And I would say it still stands like that. It's brutal. It was not a good thing. Yeah. So here we go. Here's your primary source, your firsthand account of the Trail of Tears. Oops. This is my birthday, December 11th, 1890. I'm 80 years old today. I was born at King's Iron Works in Sullivan County, Tennessee, December the 11th, 1810. I grew into manhood fishing in Beaver Creek and roaming through the forest hunting the deer and the wild boar and the timber wolf, often spending weeks at a time in the solitary wilderness with no companions but my rifle, hunting knife, and a small hatchet that I carried in my belt in all of my wilderness wanderings. On these long hunting trips, I met and became acquainted with many of the Cherokee Indians. The removal of Cherokee Indians from their lifelong homes in the year of 1838 found me a young man in the prime of life and a private soldier of the American Army. Being acquainted with many of the Indians and able to fluently speak their language, I was sent as interpreter into the Smoky Mountain country in May 1838, and I witnessed the execution of the most brutal order in the history of American warfare. I saw the helpless Cherokees arrested and dragged from their homes and driven at bayonet point into the stockades, the concentration camps. In the chill of a drizzling rain on October morning, I saw them loaded like cattle or sheep into 645 wagons and started toward the west. One can never forget the sadness of that morning. Chief John Ross, remember hero, led in prayer, and when the bugle sounded, the wagon started rolling. Many of the children rose to their feet and waved their little hands goodbye to their mountain homes, knowing they were leaving them forever. Many of these helpless people didn't have blankets, and many of them had been driven from home barefoot. On the morning of November the 17th, we encountered a terrific sleet and snowstorm with freezing temperatures. And from that day until we reached the end of the fateful journey on March the 26th, 1839, the sufferings of the Cherokee were awful. The trail was a trail of death. They had to sleep in the wagons and on the ground without fire. And I've known as many as 22 of them to die in one night of pneumonia due to ill treatment, cold, and exposure. Among the summer was the beautiful Christian wife. Many of these were Christianized, by the way. Okay. And Andrew Jackson called himself a Christian. Uh huh. Just want you to know there are hypocrites out there. Sorry, I have to say it. I say this every time I teach it. Okay. Among the summer was the beautiful Christian wife of Chief John Ross. Quady Ross was her Christian name. Uh, or I think Quady was actually her Native American. I don't know. It's hard because many Native Americans lost their names trying to assimilate to white culture for survival. This noble hearted woman died, giving her only blanket for the protection of a sick child. She rode through a blinding sleet and snowstorm, developed pneumonia, and died in the still hours of a bleak winter night with her head resting on Lieutenant Gregg's saddle blanket. I made the long journey to the west of the Cherokees, and I did all that a private soldier could do to alleviate, to try to help their sufferings. When on guard duty at night, I many times walked my beat in just my shirt, my undershirt, in order that some sick child might have the warmth of my overcoat. I was on guard duty the night Mrs. Ross died, and at daylight was detailed by Captain McClellan to assist in the burial, like the other unfortunates who died on the way. Her uncoffined body was buried in a shallow grave by the roadside, far from her Native American home. And the sorrowing cavalcade, a cavalcade, as you might guess, is a caravan, moved on. But cavalcade also, like funeral procession, has that kind of imagery. The long, painful journey to the west ended March 26, 1839. So remember, that was March 26th, 1839, and they left May 1830. Wait, yeah. Wow, crazy. So yeah, a lot of months here. With 4,000 and probably more, the estimates are higher. Silent graves reaching from the foothills of the Smoky Mountains to what's known as Indian Territory in the west in Oklahoma. And covetousness, greed on the part of the white race was the cause of all the Cherokees had to suffer. In the year 1828, a little Indian boy living on Ward Creek had sold a gold nugget to a white trader, and that nugget sealed the doom of the Cherokees. So, greed for gold. In a short time, the country was overrun with armed brigands or bandits, claiming to be government agents who paid no attention to the rights of the Indians, who were the legal possessors of the country. Crimes were committed that were a disgrace to civilization. Men were shot in cold blood, lands were confiscated, homes were burned, and the inhabitants driven out by the gold hungry brigands or bandits. Chief Junaluska, sorry, yet another Native American hero, should be just called American hero. Chief Junaluska was personally acquainted with President Andrew Jackson. Junaluska, and this always makes me so much more, even more mad, right? So, there was a thing, this Battle of Horseshoe, um, said Junaluska had taken 500 of his Cherokee scouts and helped Andrew Jackson win, and this is before Andrew Jackson obviously was president, win the Battle of Horseshoe. This is when the French, British, people in Europe were still trying to get some territory back, and from the Americans, the British, who then became Americans. And so Junaluska actually teamed up with Andrew Jackson, who was a military leader at the time, to win the Battle of Horseshoe. And it says New Orleans, but actually Horseshoe, I think these people have it wrong. Horseshoe is, because it looks like a horseshoe, is a battle. Here, I'll just show you. I thought it was Kentucky. I don't know why it would say New Orleans. Let's look. Let's see. And it said in the Mississippi Territory, now Central Alabama. Wow. It's the Horseshoe Bend because it looks like a horseshoe. Let me just show you the image. I think it's just going to be easier. Oh, weird. Yeah, here it is. Like this is the picture that I've seen. And I guess it covers a lot of territory. Anyway, they call it the Battle of Horseshoe because it was in this horseshoe shaped, in and around this horseshoe shaped area. And it was the War of 1812, like I told you, where the British and the French. Um, if you watch The Last of the Mohicans with me, that time period. Anyway, what you really need to take from this is that may not be written in a lot of history books is that in that battle, Junaluska was helping out the very person or the very people, the very federal government that would end up wiping out most of the Native Americans. He took 500 of his own people, teamed up to win the Battle of Horseshoe. He lost 33 of his men in that. And in that battle, Junaluska also drove his tomahawk through the skull of a Creek warrior when the Creek warrior had Jackson at his mercy. So this, he put it in a really nice way, but basically Chief Junaluska saved Andrew Jackson's life from a warring tribe, the Creek, who were with the French versus with the American federal government. And so Junaluska, Chief Junaluska, not only helped Andrew Jackson win the Battle of Horseshoe, but also saved Andrew Jackson's life when a Creek warrior was getting ready to like tomahawk his head off, or probably like this. Chief John Ross, so Chief John Ross of the Cherokee, so fast forward, now Andrew Jackson's president. Now he's saying, all of you Cherokee have to go away. I want you out of the gold territory. So Chief John Ross is like the chief of the Cherokee is like, dude, Junaluska, which Lake Junaluska is named after Chief Junaluska, by the way. And if you've ever been to Lake Junaluska, all of these connections should be like blowing your brain away to our region, to your life, like current life. So Chief John Ross sent Junaluska as an envoy to plead with President Jackson for protection for his people. But Jackson's manner was cold and indifferent toward the person who had saved his life. He met Junaluska, heard his plea, but curtly said, "Sir, your audience has ended. There's nothing I can do for you." What an a-hole. I'm sorry, there's no other way to put it. The doom of the Cherokee was sealed. Washington, D.C. had decreed they must be driven west into lands given to the white man. And in May 1838, an army of 4,000 regulars and 3,000 volunteer soldiers under command of General Winfield Scott marched into the Indian country and wrote the blackest chapter on the pages of American history. Although I would say we're getting some pretty bad stuff happening in our time that is reminiscent of some of this stuff. Men working in the fields were arrested and driven to the concentration camps, the stockades. Women were dragged from their homes by soldiers whose language they could not understand. Children were often separated from their parents. Does that sound familiar? It should. Remember when the immigrants were being rounded up, and it's not even really like a lot of them were legitimate. A lot of them were not trying to get something over on people. They just wanted. Anyway, children were often separated from their parents and driven into the stockades to the concentration camps alone, with the sky for a blanket and the earth for a pillow. And often the old and infirm, which means sickly, were prodded with bayonets like they were cattle, or I mean, you shouldn't even treat cattle that way because their meat will taste bad. But they were prodded with bayonets to hasten them to the stockades. Happy cows make good cows. All right, we're prodded with bayonets to hasten them to the stockades. In one home, death had come during the night. Oh, this is one of those images. Okay, we're getting into the stuff that's like, a little sad-faced child had died and was lying on a bearskin couch, and some women were preparing the little body for funeral. All were arrested and driven out, leaving the child in the cabin. I don't know who buried the body. It was really important to Native Americans that they get to send off the bodies of the dead. It's important to almost every culture. In another home was a frail mother, apparently a widow, and three small children, one just a baby. When told she must go, the mother gathered the children at her feet, prayed a humble prayer in her native tongue, patted the old family dog on the head. They had to leave their pets behind told the faithful creature goodbye, and I'm sure that the pets tried to follow. I'm sure some of them got shot too. He's not even saying that. With a baby strapped on her back and leading a child with each hand, started on her exile. But the task was too great for that frail mother. A stroke of heart failure relieved her sufferings. She sunk and died with her baby on her back and her other two children clinging to her hands. I mean, oh my God, like, woo, that would get me, that gets me, that hits hard. So Chief Junaluska, who had saved President Jackson's life at the Battle of Horseshoe, actually witnessed this scene and the tears gushing down his cheek. I mean, this is like this brave Native American warrior who's been leading people. I mean, he led, like, again, he helped Jackson win the Battle of Horseshoe. So he's like a warrior, famous warrior. The tears, like mine now, gushing down his cheeks and lifting his cap, he turned his face toward the heavens and said, "Oh my God, if I had known at the Battle of Horseshoe what I know now, American history would have been differently written." In other words, if you're not catching it, he is saying, if I had known what this man was going to do, I would not have saved his life. I would have let him die on the battlefield that day. Or probably would, or I wouldn't have even helped him like win, be successful at battle. I would have let the Creek Indians just wipe him and all those soldiers out. Whew, right? Same. At this time, 1890, we are too near the removal of the Cherokee for our young people to fully understand the enormity of the crime that was committed against a helpless race. Truth is, the facts are being concealed from young people of today. School children of today do not know that we're living on lands that were taken. We definitely are. That were taken from a helpless race at the bayonet point to satisfy the white man's greed. Murder is murder, whether it's committed by the villain skulking in the dark or by uniformed men stepping to the strains of military music. In other words, obeying orders. Don't care if it's a soldier obeying orders or some robber trying to mug you at night. Murder is murder. Murder is murder, and somebody must answer. Somebody must explain the streams of blood that flowed in Indian country in the summer of 1838. Somebody must explain the 4,000 silent graves that marked the trail of the Cherokees to their exile. I wish I could forget it all, but the picture of 645 wagons lumbering over the frozen ground with their cargo of suffering humanity still lingers in my memory. Let the historian of a future day, that's us, it's me, we, that's us, tell the sad story with its sighs, its tears, and its dying groans. Let the great judge of all the earth weigh our actions and reward us according to our work. This is my birthday story. Sorry, it ends in the copy I've always had. This is my birthday story, uh, December 11th, 1890. So, tell me what you thought of this in your journal. Uh, I asked the questions in journal, or you can just listen to them right here. Tell me what you thought. What did you learn? And how did this primary? I mean, I know me crying made it pretty or maybe made it powerful too. But how did the fact that this was a primary source document and this dude witnessed Chief Junaluska witnessing that scene of that mother dying with the baby on her back and the two children having a heart attack, with like her still holding her children and the children still alive, to go through that, talk about trauma, right? So how does hearing about it as a primary source document change your opinions of things, or make it have a more impact, or how does it change the way you think of it versus if I had just read you this, right? So how can primary source documents help us understand history better? How can anyway, how does it change the way we view history? um, or you can just tell me what you learned, right, about what you learned. Or I usually have a much larger assignment with this, like I was saying. some of the other questions are, um, what 3 or 4 scenes really stood out to you, had the most impact to you. And then even in the beginning, remember, this to me makes the story have more impact as well. He talks about how he grew up with the Cherokee. Like they taught him how to hunt and how to fish. I mean, these are people that he grew up with, learning from, and and actually looking up to as a culture. So just tell me what you thought. What do you thought about the sentence, witness the execution? Anyway, I hope you, I know enjoyment's not the word, but I hope you learned a lot from this. If you hadn't heard this before, I think every human being needs to read this story, this particular primary source document. But especially we are living on the lands that were taken from these people so brutally. So I especially think us living here now, where we live, should be very, 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 very careful to make sure that we understand and know the history behind the place that we live. So, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Better to knowledge is power, regardless of whether it's happy knowledge or sad knowledge. It's still knowledge and it's still powerful. All right. I love you guys. Much peace and love. It's one of the last kind of readings I'll do to you. I'll do to you. I'll do for you for the school year. So, except for finishing our book study, that's going to be, I'm going to be doing a lot of reading videos like this for that. So, anyway, peace out. I love and miss you guys.